I am here with Tom Caldwell, one of Canada's leading business and finance people. He has the Order of Canada, but he's also a devout Christian, and he contributes a great deal to the welfare of our society and is a major supporter of the Christian and faith community. It's my privilege, then, to be in conversation with Tom Caldwell as we see how the Bible comes alive in our country. Well, Tom, it's a great delight to be with you today, and on behalf of the Canadian Bible Society, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a conversation with us about the faith, about the Bible, and about your life and your work, Tom. Welcome to the Canadian Bible Society.
It's good to be with you, and it's good to see you again.
Thanks, Tom. Tom, please tell our audience something about your background and what influences in your life have improved or influenced your faith development.
Well, I grew up in Toronto in a family. We didn't have any particular faith basis, although I did go to Sunday school occasionally. My father passed away when I was very young, and he had significant issues prior to that. And I guess one of the influences in my life has been people. I watch people. It could be a teacher, an employer, someone old, someone I didn't know how to be, so I would try to emulate things that I thought were laudatory or valid. And also, you know, there were some examples I didn't want to be like too. So it's watching people was the starting point. Faith was really not a part of my life until into my early 30s, 31 or so. You know, when I looked at my life right up until that time, it just wasn't working properly. I was married, we had children, and things were not going well. And you know, I always keep joking, if there's a pattern in your life, you are the pattern. I know that sounds like Marshall McLuhan, but there were changes that I had to make in my life, in my thinking, my attitudes, my behaviors. And so I had to really start again in my early 30s, about 31. And part of this is my Christian journey. I think it started, I guess, a fellow I was working with one day invited me to Ontario Prayer Breakfast. And I didn't even know what this was or what it even pertained to. I went there were a lot of people. They seemed semi-normal. And I thought that was I was kind of amazed that so many people actually went and had a prayer and prayed about governments, etc. And as you know, I've stayed involved in that for years and years now. The other was one of the fellows, another fellow I worked with, invited me to a Bible study at lunchtime called Tuesday on the Square. Desmond Hunt, who was an Anglican bishop, and he would read a section of the Bible, and then he would discuss it. And I found this was really interesting to me. It was like an oasis in my week. I'm in the investment industry, as you know. But I found that relevant, and I found it interesting because when I was a little kid, I remember these quiz shows. If you had any books you had to keep on a desert island, and people would say the Bible, and I would look at it. I never understood it. I didn't know what people were talking about. I usually got lost in the begats and et cetera. So it was quite interesting. So I really got to look forward to going up to Tuesday on the Square and just listening to the Bible explained. And Desmond was very good at that, quite clear. And they had a lunchtime, and they stayed. I never stayed for lunch. I would go just for that and leave, sitting in the back row, non-committal. But I did that for some period of time. So that was an influence. Those were kind of the baby steps, if you will, and to seeing that this was relevant in my life. There were many, many examples of. My wife had become a Christian before me through things like the PTL, which was flawed in many ways, but it doesn't matter. That, you know, the Lord uses flawed messengers like me. I won't say.
Well, I know all of us, all of us, Tom.
You know, I'm a stumbler and a fumbler, and I try not to do too much damage on the way through.
Do no harm. Right?
But yeah, absolutely. So, but this was meaningful to her, and that was also an influence in my life. So Dorothy definitely was. So those were the types of influences I had in my life on this journey. Although I will say one thing to you. I remember one night I came home And I'd accepted the concept that God existed. Okay, there was the God, he was big, he was out there, and he was pretty annoyed at me. That was kind of the feeling I had. And it's funny, speaking of the Bible, because I refer to it, and I still have to keep a Bible on my desk and check on things. And I remember I came home one night. He said, okay, I got to get this Jesus thing sorted out. So here's the deal. I mean, my prayers are not on record at the Vatican or anything, let me tell you this. And I said, I'm going to open the Bible. It's going to be a one-shot deal. If you got something to say to me about Jesus, tell me. So I flipped it open, and it was John 14. And it's Christ talking to Thomas. He said, believe in God, John 14, believe in God, believe also in me. And that spoke directly to it. Believe in God, but believe also in me. And in fact, it was talking to Thomas at the time. And you know, unlike Thomas, I didn't say my Lord and my God, because you have to understand I am cynical. So what does a guy like me do? I close the Bible, I rustle the pages so there'll be no cheating, and I open it a second time. Believe in God, believe also in me. Also in me. That wasn't the epiphany, tremendous event, but that was really the capper to me. So it was very shortly after that I accepted Christ as who he says he is.
And from there, in terms of your journey with the Christian faith, and in what form did it take, and how did you then sort of grow in your faith and in a community of faith after you'd sort of come to this moment of illumination?
Well, Desmond Hunt asked me to come to his church, and we did, a Church of Messiah down on Avenue Road in DuPont. So we went there for many years and raised our children there. For my sins, I became a warden of the church as well. And Desmond and I were very close friends, and as well as his being my mentor and pastor. So that was part of it. We continued on there for many years. Des passed away. We, some years ago, joined the Catholic Church because, frankly, it wasn't that I was going away from something. It's just something that met a bigger spectrum. And I certainly had some of the views that I felt they were clearer upon, abortion, other matters like that, they just seemed to have a clearer stance. And listen, no church is perfect. Yeah, right. Desmond had a great line. He said, if you find a perfect church, don't go there because you'll wreck it. and it's true.
Yes.
But I just agreed with the stances. And I felt it was very important when I went to a church that they talked about Jesus.
Right.
I don't want to talk about the social issues. I get bombarded with that stuff enough. I'm there to hear about miracle. I'm here to talk about healing, about growth, about progress, about power. So I think sometimes some of the churches got off message. You know, we're not social action groups. There's things we should do as a result of being a Christian. That's a different matter. But a lot of my Christian growth did not necessarily come from in the church. It came experiential. I'll bore you with a story or two. I mean, I remember I hadn't worked for some period of time when I went through this period of transition in my life. And whenever I had money, I would lend it to people. And things are very tight now in this period of time, so I would go and dun people for money to try to get back to make ends meet. And my wife said to me one day, if you want to be forgiven and if you want to grow, you're going to have to forgive everybody that owes you money. And I said, are you crazy? And she said, I want you to do that. So I went to, and I still remember, it was 1974, and a fellow owed me $4,000. That was the last fellow. I met him in the TD Center. I said, here's your markers back. You don't owe me a cent. I don't care if you win the lottery tomorrow. And it was like being so unburdened. When I walked away, I remember saying, thank God I got out of that one, as if I paid the money off. Yes. And what was also interesting to me was about 3 weeks later, my boss called me in. I worked for Fry Mills Spence. And he said, we're going to merge the company with Burns Brothers in Denton to form Burns Fry, now Nesbitt Burns. And I said, what does that mean to me? He said, well, you have a debit. I wasn't earning the commission I was collecting. And I said, how much is it? And he said, well, it's $4,000. And we're going to forgive you that, and plus we're going to give you another $2,000 on top of it because you've been working hard. And, you know, I get goosebumps just telling you that story.
Yes.
Because first you're afraid God doesn't exist, then you're afraid he does exist. And it was really... And I've had several coincidences of that nature. I told other people, some people, oh, that's just a coincidence. No, it's not.
Yeah.
So that kind of builds your faith. I have too many coincidences in my life now really backslide. Oh, I wonder, it's an adventure I've been on. It's been a wonderful adventure, and it's an adventure of growth. But a lot of it has come experientially. One of the side things I learned from that is I never lend money anymore. I give it. And you know what? That has saved me so much money. People will ask you to give them $500. They won't ask you to give them $5,000 or $50,000 kind of thing. So it actually cuts your exposure. But that way I get to keep my friends. And I'm part of the solution, because the second I lend someone something,
it changes.
I'm not part of the problem.
It becomes transactional, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, no, exactly.
And so I don't have that many friends to put it at risk.
Yeah.
So just giving it is like freeing. And I've had people run out of stores saying, I'm going to pay you that money back. I don't even remember who they are. So it's that freeing experience. So a lot of my Christian journey has been in that type of event.
And it's very interesting, Tom, because there is the biblical concept of Jubilee. And the biblical concept of Jubilee is, and I mean, it goes back to the agrarian times and the people of Israel, that there would be the forgiveness after 7 years of debts. And it would also mean that fields would not be plowed, and that they would remain unused in order that they could replenish and renew themselves. And so Jubilee became a very powerful tool, but it was also considered by the people of Israel to be a liberating tool. This notion of forgiving things and restarting and having relationships that then arise out of that state of forgiveness.
Absolutely.
And it restarts relationships. And you can see that in the teachings of Jesus. I mean, his emphasis on forgiveness and how many times do you forgive? And this is, of course, the sins of others. This is not just the monetary aspect, but forgiveness is a powerful image, and you're an example of that in very concrete terms. Tom, look, you are well known within the business community here and well respected. You have, as I can see, the Order of Canada. So you're recognized as somebody who's been a leader within the business community. What initially, though, gave you the passion to get involved in the business community? I mean, from someone who had a father who had died at a young age, how did someone who came from that sort of background come into the role of high finance?
Well, a dear friend of mine, long passed away, Jack Reed, was an artist. He said, if I ever get to heaven, it's because I've been backing away from hell. And my father was in the meatpacking business, and I worked in the summers in a meatpacking plant. So the one thing I knew I didn't want to do is I did not want to go into the meatpacking business. So I was invited to go into see a brokerage firm, a small firm, many years ago. I guess I was about 17 or 18. And I thought, this is kind of interesting. It's like an ongoing puzzle. You're trying to figure out what's going to happen in the world, and you're trying to position your clients and yourself or whatever such that you can either benefit from events or at least get out of the way of damage if it's coming. And it's one that sort of catered to a very wide spectrum of my interests. I never knew what I wanted to do when I grow up, and I'm still not totally sure. But the concept of having something that catered to a broad spectrum of my interests. So I resolved that's what I would like to do, and so I didn't have any connection. In those days, you had to be connected, and even these days, you still have to be to get into the industry. But 2 years I walked up and down Bay Street every summer trying to get a summer job when I was in university, and one year I walked into an office and it was vacant, and there was a man who came out. And I didn't realize a fellow by the name of Bob McRae who started CI Mutual Funds. And we just hit it off. I didn't realize he was a very large client of several firms. So he said, hang on. And he called a company Royal Securities, which became Merrill Lynch Royal Securities, and said, a good friend of mine, and we've been friends now for 15 minutes in his office. And that's how I got into the business. And it just went from one to another. And it's been an exciting time to be in the business. I ended up working in administration in the cage and bond trading and equity trading. And over the years, I worked in every area of the securities industry.
In terms of being a Christian working within the world of finance and of business, are there any sort of unique challenges that you face as a Christian engaging in the world of finance?
I don't think so. I guess you come down to ethical considerations. You know, the key in decision making is to do the right thing. If you do the right thing, things will work out. And if you try to do the right thing, even if you mess it up, and you're going to, the world we live in is so jam-packed with regulations, it's pretty hard not to go over a tripwire. And our firm has in the past. But, you know, the key is to keep trying to do the right thing. The danger in all businesses, I think, is not straight ethical, making, you know, purposely dishonest. It's the rationalizers. You know, I always say crooks are easy to spot. They wear black shirts, white ties, thin mustaches. It's the rationalizers you got to be careful. It's because they look like us, they sound like us, and they are us. Mm. So you just keep trying to do the right thing. And if you're part of a decision that's being made, you just make it on the basis of your own, you know, ethical standards. And most people try to do the right thing. I would say that, you know, in business. I know there's sometimes a little bit of Christian snobbery we have, that if you're in business, so you're obviously a money grubber, et cetera, et cetera. You know, some of the strongest Christians I've ever known have been in business and understand the nature, because business is about people.
Yeah. Mm.
And for example, I talk to some of my clients, talk to them more often than they talk to their lawyers, their doctors, their priests, or anybody. I always joke, I know more than a lady's hairdresser. I know everything that's going on. And I've been consulted, encouraged, dealt with both my clients and their children. One of my best days as an advisor, I picked up one of my biggest clients many, many years ago, 30 years ago, and we were driving up Bayview, and I was taking him to a Renaissance House because he had a major alcohol and drug problem.
Renaissance House.
And I laughed. We were going up the street, and he said, "I'm never going to deal with you again." And I said, "Well, that's okay, because you're going to be dead, and I'll be dealing with your wife, and I'd rather deal with her than you any day of the week." That man had been sober 30 years before he passed away. What an incredible privilege to be included in someone's life.
Yes.
So your job can be and should be your ministry in some form. Not that you run around, you know, wearing it on your sleeve and judging everybody else, but just how you act, how you behave. Yeah. It's like children. After your kids are, 13 years of age, 10, 11, they don't listen to you. They watch you. The same with employees, partners, everybody else. People watch your behavior. That says everything.
One of the joys that I've experienced, particularly the last couple of years in the Canadian Bible Society, but also before that in my many years of ministry, is recognizing that discipleship, being a follower of Jesus, can take so many different forms, and that there's not one avenue, there's not one place that is set aside just to be a disciple, that you are a disciple wherever you are. And you look at the life again, I go back to Jesus. You know, many times he talks about money. Many times he talks about investing. Many times he talks about how we use what we have been given, how we share it, how we acquire it, how we use it. It is something that is a natural part of the exchange of life. And it's how then, though, as a disciple, do you live with that? And one of the things, Tom, that you're known for is philanthropy. How has your philanthropy been an extension of your faith and of your own discipleship?
Well, I think it's an extension of my faith, discipleship, and of our business, and of our partners in our business, because we all want to do good. I'll give you an example. We invested in the Bombay Stock Exchange. It was a terrible investment, by the way. But when we go into a country, we don't want to go as carpetbaggers. So we were approached, my son Brendan was approached, to fund an orphanage in Bombay. And I turned it down. Actually, I said, no, I want to see where our money is going. I want to see the good that it's doing. And about 3 months later, I got up one morning, and I was so convicted that we had to do it. I came to work that day, and I said to Angela Stirpe, our CFO, I said, find out who those people were. And the long and the short of it, we funded this orphanage. We had 30 little girls in India. And by the way, they were praying vehemently that the money would come, and this was the last week the money would come before they lost the option on the land. Wow. So I call it the Holy Spirit, or call it a coincidence, whatever. But let's talk about that investment. It is incredible. And all of the people in our company buy into this, because I want to include them in what we're doing. I want to be an example, but I want them to be part of the example. And everybody is. We have pictures of these little girls, and we've had it now for over 15 years, and they're tremendous kids. And our oldest girl, Rhea, just graduated a little, and she got a full scholarship in medical school. She's going to be a doctor. As you know, my wife had severe cancer some years ago.
I do
and
indeed.
It was everything. It was as bad as you could imagine.
Yes.
These little girls got up every morning and prayed for Dorothy Auntie as a group every day before they went to school. And that's not a cash dividend, but my gosh, and my wife is healed.
Yes.
Thank the Lord.
Yes.
And thank those little children for their prayers, because when they pray, God's going to answer. There is no condition in there, no doubt in their mind at all. I used to go to meetings at the Bombay Stock Exchange, and I'd say, well, I have a meeting uptown. I have some other business. I'd go and see the kids. And they were so great. They were so encouraging of one another.
Yes.
They referred to each other as their sisters. And two little girls were left in garbage dumps, and they survived. So it's been a remarkable blessing for me.
Yeah.
I always love the joke when somebody said, well, when someone dies, how much money did he leave? And the answer is always the same, all of it.
Yes, exactly. In terms of the next generation, I mean, I've observed you around young people. I've observed you having a passion for worship in the school where you used to, or that you support. And what hope do you have for future leaders in Canada's business and faith communities, Tom? What's the future look like to you?
Well, I'm an incurable optimist. I keep telling people I've decided to be an optimist because I notice they're richer than pessimists. So I've decided to be an optimist. And I am with young people. Now, we're not serving them well in our educational things. We're getting them off message. But kids want to know. These young people want to know. They want to do things. We bring on several interns every summer, and I usually spend some time with them, an hour or so, and we talk about everything. And I'm like an old drill sergeant. I'm a tough old guy, kind of thing. But we have a lot of laughs, and I laugh at me, and then we laugh together. But try to encourage a confidence in them. And they're great kids. They're great young people. I finished a stint as honorary colonel of Lincoln and Welland Regiment down in St. Catharines. A lot of our soldiers there, a lot of them come from not very well-off circumstances, very poor circumstances. And you see these young people develop a sense of purpose, belonging, commitment, caring about other people. It's amazing to watch. So you can get confidence in it. And remember, growing up is the journey from self to others. And unfortunately, we spend a lot of time on self. And I don't think these computers help. I don't think not having real relationships. I think connection is very important, and that's what we have to encourage. I watch young people go to lunch in the food court downstairs, and you see when they're two people together, they're talking and having how important that is. We have to build that up. Ethics, history, and considering others. I mean, when I grew up, the lady next door, she didn't like me, and I didn't like her. She was an old lady, and I was a noisy kid. But when I shoveled the snow at our house, I always shoveled hers. It was no discussion. I never asked for a penny. It was just something you did. It was how you were brought up. And I think we have to try to instill that, because we're not serving young people as well as we might. But they're all great, given an opportunity and showing them. And in some of them, I have to say, make eye contact and say good morning to people, because they haven't even taught that, either in the home or in academia. So I'm positive about it. And a lot of the stuff kids are dished out in school, they're not buying into. They have a brain. They can work it out themselves. And I tell our young people, particularly the interns, be cynical. Don't accept everything you're told. Do your own thinking, and you'll come up with the right answer. So I'm probably more. It's very easy as an old person to see how badly this next generation, these kids, darn kids, kind of thing. But I'm more positive than negative.
And it was. I had a conversation with a friend of mine. I was in the UK a couple of weeks ago, and we were just saying, you know, that in his church he's got some new younger people coming, and he likes them. And they're different, but he likes them. The way they learn, the way they speak to one another, it's different. And he said, you know, and he caught himself and his wife saying, you know, they aren't as friendly as we were in the 1970s. And then he looked back at some photographs in an album, and he said, and I just thought and relived some of the moments from the 1970s, thinking, well, actually, we weren't that great either, to be absolutely honest with you. And, you know, when you see the photos of the bell-bottoms and the long hair and some of the influences in our lives in the 1970s, they weren't exactly pristine, gorgeous, and upright.
Absolutely.
But I'm glad you're positive. And I noticed that even, I mean, I know you continue, and you mentioned the influence of the prayer breakfast on you early on in your faith development. You're still involved there. In fact, when I'm speaking at a prayer breakfast or attending one, invariably that's where I get to see you. What is it about the prayer breakfast today now, and this is years later after your own sort of personal sense of coming to the faith, what do you think the prayer breakfasts add to the life of the Christian community?
Well, we're to preach the gospel. And that doesn't mean to say, given the full buffet right now, that sometimes people have to be treated gently. I was quite hostile to churches, frankly, for reasons real and imagined growing up. And the fact that I was invited to this thing and people were praying, that was a witness to me. Whether I bought into it or not, I was a witness. The people were praying. These people, as I said, seemed normal. They're praying for people. And there was a speaker who shared his or her experience. And I think many people, many of us, relate to someone sharing their experience more than someone telling you. See, my family's all Irish. We're all from Northern Ireland kind of thing. I'm the only Northern Irish Catholic in the whole family. The rest are all Orangemen. They're all spinning in their graves. But you know, if you say, this is what you should do, as soon as you got the word should in there, I, as an Irishman, have now tuned out.
Right.
But if you say, here's what I did, here's what I experienced, here's how I overcame that, here's how I dealt with this thing, I identify and relate to that. And I remember I took one fellow one year, non-Christian, and the lady was speaking, was an elderly woman, and I thought, this guy was like the Great Gatsby, handsome, good-looking guy, and cool, had his own airplane, Ferrari, everything else. And I thought, he's not going to relate at all. When we left, he said, that was the greatest talk I've ever heard. This elderly, but it was communicating in the spirit, communicating her emotions, communicating how she felt, because those are universal. Doesn't matter what your age is. We still have the same emotions, anger, fear, upset, you know, all these things. So I think people will come there who might not otherwise go to a church, because I wouldn't have gone necessarily to a church in those days. But having gone there, I thought, oh, this is interesting to me. And then the other fellow inviting me to a Bible study where it was unpacked for me, because I wasn't there for worship, because I didn't even know what to worship. So I think it's a soft evangelism, if you will, where people can relate to just a person sharing their experiences and including the fact of Christ in their lives. I think that's very powerful.
Tom, we live in our society, in Toronto in particular, but also internationally in Canada, we live in a very pluralistic, very multicultural society. We have many different influences. How important do you feel faith is in nurturing the notion of a civil society, of a society that cares and respects? What do you see as faith's role in all of that?
Well, right now we're seeing the ripple of faith. And what I mean by that, we're probably in many ways in the post-Christian era. And make no mistake, there is a war on Christianity. You see it here in Toronto, you can see it everywhere. But like it or not, the ripple effect is we're still living in a society very strongly influenced by Christianity. That's why people come here. The basic premise that you are your brother's keeper. You should forgive. You know, give the extra. Be, humble, in spirit, modest in how you live, and think generously, giving to others. So the Christian message is still permeating our thinking. People take advantage of that. and people redo history. We obliterate history. I mean, we've had in the last year somewhere close to 100 churches burned in Western Canada. So I think it's very important that we remember our roots, because if you look at secular society, they become tyrannical, make no mistake about it. History has shown us that. Whether it's communism, Nazism, Marxism, whatever, they become tyrannical. And I think the beauty of Christianity, faith, is we look to a higher standard, knowing, by the way, that most of us fall short of that standard. But it's a point of striving. And I think that's important for a society, that we do think of other people. We are prepared to forgive. We're prepared to be tolerant. It's the people that yell that we're not tolerant who are the intolerant ones, kind of thing. It's you remake history so you can create your own, and that's the danger. But the ripple effect of the Christian world that we created, which made the West a magnet for everybody in prosperity, in thinking, in freedom of thought, that you have a higher authority than the government. In China, the party ranks ahead of your mother, your father, certainly your faith, or anybody else that's the party. And that's what secular society's become. And that is concerning. But I think the interesting point is Christianity and Judaism as well have both prospered during periods of persecution. That's when you're forced to decide what you believe, what you stand for. And so I'm not pessimistic about that as well. I've read the end of the book. It works out all right.
The end of the book works. We know the end of the story. Yeah. Well, God knows the end of the story.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Tom, on a personal note as we wind down, and I ask this of every guest, what is it that you would like us, as an audience, as people who are listening and watching here, to pray for? And what to pray for you, but also to pray for in terms of the world as a whole?
Well, many years ago, again in my early Christian journey, a friend of mine, Dennis Freeman, said, I want you to ask for help in the morning and say thank you every night. And I said, what do you mean? He said, pray. And I remember saying to him, well, what if you don't believe in anything? And he gave me the best theological argument I've ever had. He said, why don't you do what you're told to for a change and just shut up? Now, I relate to that. Again, I'm back to being Irish.
Yeah, right.
But I did that for my whole life since that time. But I find myself these days giving the Lord thanks. As soon as I get up in the morning, I just thank Him for the day and thanking Him. So my prayers become one of just gratitude and thanks for my life, the time I've had, the richness I've had, the people I've had in my life, the country I live in, where I was born. I mean, I won the lottery being born here. That's the real thing. If you grow up in Canada and you try not to make too many mistakes, you're going to be all right. So gratitude is the main thing I pray for. The needs, the Lord knows the needs of all of us and of this world, which is a fallen world. We have big, big, big problems, and we're unkind and even cruel to one another. So the Lord knows that, and that needs prayer. If I had to be selfish and ask for a specific prayer, I would ask for prayers for my wife, Dorothy. That would be it, period. But for me, I'm just happy for everything. I'm just grateful.
Amen to that.
Absolutely.
Amen. Tom, thank you so much for your frankness, for your joy, for your positive attitude, for your faith, and for taking time to be with us at the Canadian Bible Society. God bless you, God bless Dorothy, and God bless your continued work in our society. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Andrew. A pleasure being with you.